Welcome, welcome. And we'll start right off with our bracha. Baruch atah Adonai Eloheinu melech haolam asher kitshanu b'mitzvotav v'tzivanu la'asok b'divrei Torah.
Amen.
And
Amen.
I'm going to go into, thank you, into the share. Hopefully you're going to see, there we go. You should be able to see it. All right, so we'd finished up discussing Aaron's death, a lot of death in this Parshat Chukat, and we're talking about how the Canaanite, remember, and we decided, Rashi, based on, of course, on rabbinic information, is that it's not just it's not Canaanite per se, they really were Amalekites, right? So this is where we're up to. Right, so we're finished this little piece and we're on to a new idea right now. Vayisu me Hor Hahar, and they journeyed from Hor Hahar, Derech Yam Suf, by way of the Reed Sea. Lisvov, I need someone to please mute. Lisvov et Eretz Edom, in order to go around, right? To go around the land of Edom, right? And we had just read a couple of paragraphs before how they had approached Edom, asked to cross their territory, stay on the king's highway, and Edom had actually not just refused, but had come out to fight them. They were ready to battle them over that. So here we are. Let's keep going. Just a little bit more, and then there's back to our Rashi. Vatiktsar nefesh ha'am badarech. And literally it means the soul of the people became short. It shortened along the way. Except we'll see how Rashi understands this ba, because ba, generally everyone who studies Hebrew will learn that ba means in, but it can also mean through, or by means of. So that's a different sense than the word in, but that's the basic meaning, and Rashi's going to explore that, right? Does it mean while they were journeying, in other words, in their journey, or does it mean because of the journey? That's the question. So let's get into the Rashi itself right now. Derech Yam Suf, by way of the Reed Sea. Suf does mean like a bulrush. And of course, we know how the Red Sea really was an elision of the Reed Sea. Kevan shemet Aaron, since Aaron had died, uva alehem milchama zo, and now they had this battle, right? This battle came. Chazru la'acharehem, they had to retreat. They went backwards. They went back behind themselves, literally is what it means. But it means they retreated. Derech Yam Suf, by way of the Reed Sea. Hu haderech, this is the way, shechazru lahem, that they had to go back, right? In other words, they had to go back once again. Keshenigzar alehem gzeirat meraglim, when the edict regarding the spies was determined against them. So if you can visualize this for a moment, they had journeyed, they had gotten to a point where they sent off the spies. They were ready 40 years before this to enter the land of Canaan. They'd sent in the spies. The spies had come back with their report. They were then condemned to wander 40 years in the desert, and they had to go back by way of the Red Sea. They were told to do that. And now they're at this point 40 years later, and here they're going back towards the Red Sea. And now this all starts to make much more sense, right? So, Shenemar, as it states back there, it actually is mentioned in the first chapter of Deuteronomy, where Moses is recounting the story to them. Usa'u midbara, God said to them, journey towards the wilderness, derech Yam Suf, by way of the Reed Sea. V'chan chazru l'achoreihem, and again they had to retreat. And he says, check out Parshat Pinchas. That's a parsha that's coming up very soon. Sheva Ma'asaot. It mentions 7 journeys. Shene'emar, as it states there in, it says chapter 10. That doesn't look right to me, but no, this I don't think this can be a correct reference, because we're looking towards much later on, and right now we're in chapter 21 in Numbers. Pinchas is in Numbers as well, so it doesn't make any sense. So, okay. I don't know if one of you has the reference here, and maybe the correct reference. Uvnei Yisrael nas'u me'be'erot b'nei Yaakam. This is what it says there. The children of Israel journeyed from Be'erot, the wells of Bnei Yaakan, Mosera, to Mosera. Sham mate Aharon. There Aaron died. Says there, right? And Rashi is going to ask a question that I'm sure some of you are maybe thinking right now. V'chi b'Mosera mate? Wait a second. Did Aaron die at Mosera, at that place? V'halo b'Hor Hahar mate. We just read that Aaron died at Hor Hahar. We read about how Moses and Elazar took Aaron up to Mount Hor, and there was a cave there, and they watched Aaron. They were present when Aaron died and traded his high priest clothing with Elazar. So, Ella Sham Chazru. But it was from that point that they went back. They hit Ablu Alav, and they mourned for Aaron. The Hispiduhu, and again, Hispiduhu means they again grieved, or they mourned, Ke'iluhu bifnehem, as if he was still in their presence. Velo, okay, sorry, Vitsei, this is a tzaddik. Go out, uvidok masaot, if you go and check where it talks about their journeys. This is in Parshat Mas'eh. It's the last parsha of the book of Numbers. The Timsa, and you will find Sheva Masaot, that there were actually 7 stages, 7 journeys, min Mosera, from Mosera to Hor Hahar, So that explains what appears to be a contradiction. L'savev et Eretz Edom, to go around, right, around the land of Edom. And Rashi simply says, because they had not allowed them, that is, the Edomites had not allowed them to cross their land. Vatiktzor nefesh ha'am baderech, right? Vatiktzar, excuse me, there it is, a batach. And the soul of the people, right, became short. I'm just going to say, either through or on the way or in the way. So Rashi tells us it was betorach haderech, meaning the torach would be the labor, the difficulty of the way. Shehuksha lahem, because this was hard on them. Amru, they were thinking, they were saying, Achshav, now, hayinu krovim likanes la'eretz, now we are close to entering the land. Ve'anu chozrim la'achorenu, and here we're having to beat a retreat. We're going backwards again. Kach chazru avotenu. That's exactly what happened with our ancestors, right? Our fathers. They had to go back. V'nishtahu shloshim ushmona shana, and they tarried for 38 years. Ad hayom, up until today. Lefichach katzra nafsham. And this is why they became impatient. That's how shortening your soul, it refers to becoming impatient, right? But be'inui haderech, in the fact that the way was giving them a hardship. Uvelashon las, and in French, this old French, right, in a foreign tongue, it is apparently, and I looked this up, this was from Sefaria, en cours del tour. Okay, so maybe this means the difficulties of the journey. And this is the Yiddish, es war ihnen ekelhoft. Okay, so ihnen means something like, in this case, they, right? They felt ekelhoft. Now, I'm not sure what ekelhoft or haft is, a noun form of a German word, of the word ekel. And I'm not sure what the word ekel means. Lawrence, sometimes you have translations there.
Well, I do for the French, and by the way, my French,
Yes.
it shows different than what you put. It shows en croûte lore
Oh,
or en
cool.
cru lore. L-O, so two words.
Of the
But
owl?
but basically what I'm getting out of it, because then they put it discouraged them in English. So I'm
Mhm.
getting that the core in French, or the crow or crew, C-R-U-T or C-R-O-T, may be
Yes.
related to C-O-U-E-R,
Yes. Mm.
heart.
You're right. Right. Mm.
And this is what I'm getting out of it. And that because it says it discouraged them, which also comes from that word C-O-U-E-R.
Yes. Maybe I'll try and I'll put as a question mark. Uh, I'll have to look this up. This may well be a modern German word as well, in terms of ekelhaft. It
And
sounds
in fact,
like.
they even just translate the whole text Rashi on the Rashi as the people became disheartened.
Okay, cool. Oh, so then you've got that right, cool meaning heart, right? Discouraged.
Mm-hmm.
Yes.
Mm-hmm.
Okay. So here's where Rashi gets
You
into.
have an F there instead of an R, by the way, in discouraged.
I see it. Thank you for seeing that. Oops.
Discouraged.
Who knows? Maybe it's another word. There we go. Thank you. Lomar, and you cannot, it cannot happen to say, meaning you can't, it's not possible to translate it, Vatikzor nefesh ha'adam baderech, to understand that the people became discouraged in the way, beheyotam baderech, that just happened to be where they were when they became discouraged. In other words, understanding the word ba as meaning in a place, meaning they became discouraged in this place. That is not what it means, he's saying. Do not understand this ba in that sense. Velo piresh bo b'ma ktsara, and it didn't say to you, it wasn't explaining to you for what reason they became discouraged. Right? In other words, that it simply was saying that the Torah is simply saying, well, that's where they were when they became discouraged, but I'm not going to tell you why they became discouraged. Okay, that to understand it in that sense. Shekol makom shetimtza kitzur nefesh, because the truth is that in every place where you find this phrase, discouraged, kitzur nefesh, b'mikra, in scripture, meforasham, it explains there, it specifies there, ba'mek tzara, in what way or why they became discouraged. It always tells you why, and that's the reason for the ba. And he gives other examples. Kagon, for example, vatikzor nafshi bahem, okay, that I became impatient, right, or discouraged through them. In other words, the behavior of those people made me feel discouraged. Ukagon, and similarly, right, because the ba definitely can't mean in here as a locative, ba, in. Uchagon, and similarly in Judges chapter 10, this was Zechariah 11, but this is chapter 10 in Judges. Vatiktsar nafsho ba'amal Yisrael. So it sounds to me like this means, and he became discouraged in the labor of Israel, meaning that the Jewish people, the Israelites, were making God, this could be talking about God, and that he became discouraged, or he became impatient or disheartened through the fact that the Israelites were not being loyal and not being faithful to God. V'chol davar hakashe al hadam, and anything, when it comes to any matter which is difficult for a person, nofel bo lashon kitzur nefesh. In other words, something that's so difficult that a person becomes, they use this phrase, kitzur nefesh, shortness of soul, that the soul is incapable of handling it. So discouraged, we use this expression kitzur nefesh, ka'adam shehatorech ba'alav, or hatorech ba'alav, excuse me, 1 second. Sorry, I had to clear my throat. Okay. That the difficulty, right? Torah, it means both difficult and something that's laborious and tough, etc. Right? When he engages such things, when it comes upon him, ve'ein da'ato rechava, and he doesn't have the patience, right? He isn't patient enough, or in that sense, lekabel oto, to accept it, oto hadavar, that very thing. Ve'ein lo makom betoch libo. It's so interesting how the way, the language that Rashi's using. And there is no place within his heart, lagur sham, to dwell there. In other words, you've just had it. You don't want it. You don't want to be part of it. You don't want to have to deal with it. And this is how he's describing it. Okay. Oto hatzar, that tribulation, that trouble, uvadavar hamatriach, and regarding that matter, that thing that is giving him all this trouble or bother, nofel lashon godel. Okay, and in that case, we would use the term godel, greatness, right? In other words, how big, how overwhelming, right, is the idea there. Shegadolhu, that it is overwhelming, v'kaved, and heavy, al ha'adam, on a person, kagon, and he gives an example, again, Zechariah 11, v'gam nafsham bachala bi. Okay, and this is using the word bachala, and their presence, or their souls, or they, just simply they, were too heavy for me. Gadla alai, was too much for me. And again in Job, vayig'a keshachal titzudeni, right? And let's see how this is. So in this case, the word vayig'a again has the idea of something that is hard and too heavy, and yigi'ah has the meaning, and I think it's with an aleph, right? To toil, right? So it's or unless it means to hunt. Oh no, tutsudeni, hunt me.
Mine listed a phrase that you didn't say. So when you said they were too much for me,
yes.
Before that I have, and their souls also loathed me.
Oh, really?
From Zechariah.
Okay, so
then they were too much for me.
Right, so
and
that's
then,
yes, right.
And the one that you're doing now, I guess, it says, and it is so great that you hunt me like a lion, from Job.
Yes, from Job. Okay, so thank you for clarification. I was having an issue with this word bachala, which I looked up, but okay. So this actually, bachala, means to, v'gam nafsham bachala. This word bachala is not a word that I'm familiar with. And so apparently they're translating it as loathed me.
Yes.
Bachalami. Okay. All
In
right.
fact, they say specifically after also loathe me, it says in the English notes in parentheses, Bachala bi.
Okay. Okay, I'm going to change this. Okay. Sorry, let me get that straightened out if I can. There we go. Okay. They loathed me. All right. And Gadla alai means was too much for me, was too heavy for me. Excuse me 1 second. I'm sorry, I have to keep coughing. Okay. Yeah, and then it's so vayig was again became a burden. Okay, like a lion, you hunt me. Klalo shel perusho. So Rashi then says he's finished the quotation. So you can say, that the result or the what you can derive from this, okay, this that the explanation of this kol lashon kitzur nefesh, that anytime it uses the expression kitzur nefesh bedavar with a certain thing, lashon, what it means is it's an expression she'ein yachol lesovlo, that a person isn't able to bear it. They find it unbearable. Hu she'ein hada'at sovlato. The idea isn't that you can't physically, but rather emotionally, hada'at, that you cannot emotionally bear this thing. It's just so he's really given a really deconstructed very, very beautifully, I think, this idea of kitzur nefesh baderech, and describing what was going through the minds of the people in having to go back this way. A little bit more. Vaydaber ha'am be'elohim uve Moshe, right? And they spoke. Remember, the word daber means in a harsh way, right? As opposed to vayomer. So they translate it very often as spoke as opposed to say. So the people spoke be'elohim uve Moshe against God and Moses, and this is what they said. And having this background that Rashi's just given us really sort of casts into light what they're saying here. Lama he'elitunu mimitzrayim. Why did you bring us up from Egypt, lamut bamidbar, to die in the wilderness? And you can understand exactly, why they would be thinking this. But they don't stop with that. They go on with something that makes it even worse. Ki ein lechem, there is no bread. Ve'ein mayim, there isn't any water. Ve'nafshenu katsa. So again, remember, tiktsar nefesh. Here we have ve'nafshenu katsa, and we cannot bear. Right? We find unbearable. We're discouraged, maybe, but unbearable. Belechem hakloel, with this miserable bread. And of course, what are they referring to? They're talking about the manna. Okay. They don't want the manna. They had it. They had it. So really talk about ingratitude, right? And again, not looking at the reason why this all happened, being willing to face up to the fact that actually God had been merciful. And by the way, there are stories that or midrashim, I'm not familiar specifically with the midrash, I'm just aware of it, that talk about that the 40 years or the 38 years literally in the desert weren't just a waste of time. And we do read elsewhere how they had encampments where they stayed for quite a long time and actually had an opportunity to enjoy life on a deep level. God didn't just make them waste their time in the wilderness. So let's keep going. Okay, be'elohim uve Moshe, with God and with Moses. Shavu eved lekonos. So there was one element of being impertinent, and not being respectful, in that they equalized the servant and his creator. so that the use of this language, they're picking up Bamidbar, this is in Bamidbar Rabbah, where they're picking up the fact that the reason why the Torah says, God and Moses is that they were holding each of them as responsible. Lama He'elitunu, maybe, or He'elitanu? Let me make sure. He'elitunu, right? So in other words, the two of them, that Moses and God, why did you, plural, bring us up? Right? Shnehem Shavim. Again, saying the two of them, equally responsible, equally, on an equal level. V'nafshenu katsa. So here we go. There's that phrase again. Af zeh lashon kitzur nefesh. Rashi tells us this has to do with finding something unbearable, right? That they're just discouraged, just disheartened, etc., etc. Umius. This is the word mius has the meaning of disgust. That it has that connotation. We're sick of it. That's what they're saying. Sick of this miserable bread, lechem haklokel. And the reason, and kal means light, right? This insubstantial bread. This is from Tractate Avodah Zarah, tractate in the Talmud, page 5. Lefi shehaman nivla be'evarim. The reason they were saying this, Rashi is saying, is that the manna became absorbed in their bodies. V'karuhu klokel, and they said that it was klokel, insubstantial. We'll translate it that way. Amru, they said, atid haman hazeh. This isn't possible. The fact that we're eating this manna and we're not having to go to the bathroom for it. They said in the future, this manna sheyitapeach b'me'enu, or b'me'enu, it's going to swell in our innards. Klum, is it possible, by way of explanation, klum yesh yilud isha, is there a one born of a woman, in other words, a human being, shemachnis ve'eno motzi, that puts in and doesn't have to extract or take out, put out? In other words, of course, who eats food and doesn't have to go to the bathroom.
It sounds like matzah. It's interesting because
they're looking at it matzah. Yeah, sometimes, by the way, of course, that there are times when manna and matzah are compared.
Yeah, matzah is binding, and it does kind of swell in the stomach because it's just dry flour. And it's like that, what we're supposed to eat to commemorate their being in the wilderness is matzah. But what they got in the wilderness was manna. And so, but maybe the binding is part of.
There's no oil in matzah. That's the problem.
What?
There is no oil in matzah.
It's just
same with the manna. There's not going to be anything that's gonna, butter or anything good. Like,
I can certainly complain.
Okay, wait a second. We know from a previous time when they complained about it, I believe, all right, that it tasted, and this is maybe coming up in the Rashi right now, that it tasted whatever they liked. The only thing it didn't taste like was leeks and onions and garlic. That's the only thing it didn't taste like. But it basically tasted.
So they couldn't say that the Israelites were stinky. That's why.
That's for sure. Well, let's see if it goes on, okay? All right. So I think it was in a previous place where they were complaining about it. But let me see.
Mm-hmm.
Just go quickly and see.
Yeah, but it could taste like anything, but what did it do to your innards?
Well, you just observed it. It was perfect food. It was perfect food.
Except for savory food isn't so great without garlic or onion.
I guess so. I don't know.
As long as they had cinnamon, I guess.
Yes. I'm not sure. The point is that they were able to think of it as anything they liked. Okay. So it didn't say that it didn't taste salty or peppery or like curry or chili. So
Mana curry.
Yeah, so anyway. And by the way, the reason it didn't taste like those things is because they were nursing children, and they didn't want to affect the milk. I seem to recollect that we actually discussed this at another point. Let's
We
keep.
did.
Okay, I'm afraid I'm going to have to stop here. And let me see what I can. Okay, David, you have a question.
Yeah, I mean, I guess along those lines, I mean, I understand all the discussion we just had, but manna was, something that God gave to them, right? So
Right.
in that sense, it's like not necessarily food of this earth, right? So can't you imagine that because it's not, something from the earth, that it's going to could have properties that, our food doesn't have. So, so they're concerned about, not being it not coming out. I mean, it just doesn't. Yeah, it seems somewhat silly, but maybe not. But
When you say
I mean,
silly in what sense? That they're complaining? Is that what you mean? What
yeah,
exactly do you mean by silly?
yeah. I mean that they're worrying about it, right?
Yeah.
That that, and then they're complaining and they're worrying, and it seems like the manna was given to them as sustenance from God, right? And it's not even natural. It's not native to this world. So of course it might do something differently to you, and its whole purpose is was to keep them alive for those 38 years. So yeah, it seems like it's something. I mean, it's something to ponder, but something that it's just, yeah, it seems like they had a lot of other things to worry about. I don't know. It just,
Okay.
yeah.
Right. So in that light and in that regard, having read what we just read with the Rashi, right? The thing that's really bothering them is that they are thinking now that they are repeating the experience of the 12 spies. That's how they're understanding this, that it's back to that situation. They're worried that they're going to have to, that they themselves are going to die out. And not only that, part of their going through those 38 years is this consolation prize as they're looking at it as the manna. And they don't want to feel that they're going through this again. I am not excusing their behavior. Their behavior is inexcusable, but I am trying to understand, as our tradition interprets the text, the level of frustration that they had. And look, if we want to take away on a personal level, is that we have to be very careful when we sense frustration and not to necessarily verbalize that frustration in ways that indicate a lack of appreciation. And it says a lot about us and our lack of faith and things like that. And so if I were to sort of try to gain some takeaway from what we're reading here, that's what I would understand, having read what we just read. So I feel I have a better understanding now of what was motivating them. But again, I've said this before, and I suspect I'll say it again many times. An explanation isn't an excuse. So,
No.
so that's
It's like I'm thinking of defending your life again, and the food. Maybe this food is more like what angels got to eat.
Oh
And,
yeah, yeah.
and then it's like maybe they didn't like it as much as they liked real food. I mean, since it's not. It doesn't have the texture, the smell, the whatever. Mom's not baking the bread. It's not, but they wouldn't know because they were all born in the. See, okay, we've already gotten rid of that whole generation, right? What would they know?
I have a feeling it's more like the fact that of what it represented than what it tasted. It could have been the most delicious food in the world, and their complaining about it had nothing to do with its flavor or its delightful nature, etc. It's what it represented in terms of the fact that and the 40 years wandering go hand in hand, and that's what they're really complaining about. And I mean, it says so much about human nature in that regard. Okay, so I'm going to stop the recording and Shabbat Shalom.